Okay, ready?
Yeah, I'm good to go whenever.
Okay, cool. Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Analog Wonderland YouTube channel. We are here for the May Wonderbox photo competition, and I'm here today with a special last-minute guest judge, Wet Plate Willow. Hello, Willow.
Hey.
Hi. How are you today?
I'm doing good. Quite exhausted. Had a bit of a busy morning of work, but we're here. We're
Yeah.
ready to judge. So,
What do you do as your day-to-day job?
I roast coffee for a living.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so I've been operating in the coffee industry for about 6 years now. So, started off as a barista, then moved on to the coffee roasting side of things.
Nice.
Yeah, so it's wonderful.
Yeah, coffee and cameras go well together.
Everyone tells me I'm like the optimum Brighton hipster
You
because,
are.
yeah. It's something I've leaned into quite a fair bit, I must admit. So
That's really cool. I feel like you're quite new in the film photography scene. Like, as in, was the Analog Spotlight the first sort of big community event you'd been to?
yeah, so funnily enough, I've been shooting analog for several years now, but
Mhm.
I've always been quite the anxious person. So I never really got involved too much with necessarily like big events and the
Yeah,
community side of things, but I upon getting the offer to come along to the event, I was just like, yeah, why not? I want to get myself out there. I want to meet everyone inside the industry, get to know more and more people who share a similar passion to
yeah.
me. So yeah, I bit the bullet, went for it. It was all a bit last minute. Pretty good with last minute, I must admit. But yeah, no, it was a great success, and I got to meet
Yeah,
loads of wonderful people, yourself included. So yeah, I honestly I'm really looking forward to doing more of it and
yeah.
getting a bit more involved.
It was so good. So Willow was at the Analog Spotlight doing wet plate portraits all day. I don't think you stopped even to have a drink of water. You were full
Uh,
on.
yeah,
But
I didn't. Bless my family brought food along, and I didn't even get a chance to eat it until I left.
but it was so good. I think you must have been one of the most popular stalls all day. It's like everyone I spoke to, you were the highlight. It was such a
Oh,
cool thing to see in person.
Oh, that's honestly, it's been sweet to hear. I've had feedback from a couple of people. So most of obviously the people who put on the event, people like Holly, obviously Alicia from Lensfair, because she was the one who actually first recommended that I come along.
Cool.
But yeah, they've all said similar things, and I've heard like a lot of people apparently were coming through the door and instantly asking where I was. So again, coming from basically not really being known at all to
Yeah,
suddenly being what everyone was interested in seeing,
yeah,
it was
you definitely.
overwhelming.
So yeah, it was so great to see that. How has it been since? Like, have you been really busy on Instagram? I feel like everyone's been posting about you since. Has it been a bit mental?
Yeah, I've I've been overwhelmed in a good way. It's yeah, it's I'm guess I'm not used to being at the forefront of attention at times, so
Yeah.
I'm quite renowned for hiding in dark corners and pretending I don't exist most of the time. So no, it's been good. I've taken the last like week just to kind of settle down a little bit, and I've had
Yeah.
obviously been bombarded with messages in regards to the event. So I've just been taking my time to kind of get back onto replying to a lot of those. And then on top of that as well, we just kind of I met obviously quite a few wonderful people, certain people who didn't actually get the chance to get their photo taken whilst they were there, and they're now arranging trips to come down to
Oh,
Brighton to come
nice.
get some done. So yeah, I've just been kind of arranging some nice little photo walks for like the next couple of months as well,
Yeah.
which would be quite nice. And again, getting to know more of these people properly within the analog
Yeah.
community. So
And
yeah,
you did a giveaway shortly after. Is that giveaway closed now? Is it still going?
no, it's still going. It's on for another week, I think it is. It's the 1st of June. So yeah, I'm offering a tintype portrait giveaway. As long as you live in the mainland UK, it's fine because unfortunately my chemicals can't really cross borders, which is a bit of a problem. Um, but yeah, it's basically I'm offering up to 5 tintype portraits in a shoot, which is a value of over £150 essentially.
Mhm.
And it's just mainly as a big thank you to, again, the massive support I've received since. It's not the biggest growth in the world, but before I went to the event, I think I only just hit 300 followers, and now
Oh,
I'm almost. Oh, sorry.
wow, no, that is a big growth. Like,
Yeah.
considering the analog community is quite small.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
yeah, that's amazing.
But yeah, no. So it's just kind of again my thanks out to everyone there, and I mean, I just again, it's for me the whole wet play process as a whole. I fell in love with it, and the history of it. To be fair, which ultimately, if we didn't have that process, we wouldn't have photography as we know it today, let alone film photography. So for me, it's a great chance to show people that kind of history to it, because most people who I've spoken to have never even heard of the wet plate collodion process, or so I'm doing tintypes as it is, but it's the overarching like process is called wet plate collodion. And yeah, it's one of these kind of things that surprisingly not many people know about, and it's most people I know only really know the history from film onwards, nothing that really came
Yeah.
beforehand, like even down to daguerreotypes or cyanotypes and stuff like that.
Mm.
So yeah, for me, it's also a great chance to show people a little bit of photographic history, I guess, but try and put a bit of a more modern tone to it, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. What surprised me was, I think Paul said after the event that you'd only been doing this type of photography for a couple of months.
Yeah, so coming up to the event, which was obviously May 14th,
Yeah,
I'd actually only taken my first proper play on March 18th.
that's insane. Like,
Yeah,
then you did a
and
full event and took about 40 or something photos that day.
yeah, I think it was about 30, I think.
That's
Um,
crazy.
but yeah, the funny thing is seeing the huge progression that I've had within that time, and it's been a short time span. But I've still got the plates, for instance, like the first two that I took, and they're both awful. They're both terrible. Um, I mean, there's an image on it, so I'm happy with that. But the comparison between them is just incredible. So the second one I took was actually a self-portrait of myself, and only a couple of days ago I did another couple of self-portraits, and
Yeah,
just
I
looking
saw
at the
that.
difference
Mm.
is other worlds. Like, and I know there's a lot of people who generally struggle to achieve a clean image with the process itself, because it is a bit finicky. It's there's a lot of involvement in it, and there's certain techniques and methods to
Mm.
perfecting it. Um, so there's certain people who may even try for years and may not even achieve a clean image, and there's nothing wrong with that. The imperfections is what makes that process kind of
Yeah.
interesting. But I'm someone who likes to strive for perfection if I can, as much so as possible, I guess. So I want the clean edges, I want the super sharpness of the image and stuff like that. So
Mm.
to have that kind of progression and see it visibly and be able to have those two plates side by side, it's kind of refreshing, and it's really it's very, very fulfilling to see that kind of
Yeah,
progression.
completely. So take us back to the beginning. How did you first get into it, or first get into film photography?
So I first got into film photography because of my father, actually. So my
Cool.
dad was never much of an actual photographer, but he used to do a lot of traveling. So he used to travel around with his camera all the time, and he'd take photos. So I've actually got I've got a very large print. I think it's an A2 size print. It was a
Mm.
photo that he took in Kenya, and it's of two cheetah. And it's a wonderful photo. I've always loved it. And he ended up passing it on to me. But as alongside passing that on to me, he also passed on the camera that he took it with and all the equipment alongside
What
it. So
camera was it?
it was an Olympus OM10. Um, Wonderful little piece of gear.
Yeah.
He gave me everything alongside it as well. So I got like a couple of lenses, filters, all that kind of stuff. And funnily enough, this tripod, which my camera is still sat on now, he bought it in 1983, and I
Yeah.
still use it. So yeah, I like to keep it kind of close to the heart, and because of again, I've got my father to thank for that. Um, But yeah, so I started shooting on the OM10 when I moved to Brighton, actually. So I did a little bit of digital work before, mainly doing skateboard photography, because in my own time I do a lot of skateboarding as well. Um, but when I moved to Brighton, after some issues, I became quite agoraphobic, and I wanted to find a way to get out the house. And knowing that Brighton's got kind of beautiful streets and a lot going on, I forced myself out with the OM10 and started doing street photography. And through that, I kind of fell in love with the analog process as a whole. And it kind of gave me a relief of comfort having that kind of camera to hide behind, I guess.
Yeah, I think a lot of people would say that about photography.
Mm.
It's a
And
bit veiled sometimes.
yeah, it's that, like, you have that great ability. As soon as the
Yeah.
camera's in front of your face, you can hide away from the world a little
Mm.
bit, and the camera becomes you essentially. Now I had that feeling for a while, and then through that, I started to realize that I really, really liked shooting photographs of people. So I then started delving into the realm of doing more portraiture-based photography, and then that's now led me to where I am now with doing so. Alongside doing the wet play collodion process, I do obviously film photography as well, and I do a lot of portraiture in regards to that. Some street photography still, but mainly the portraits. And Yeah, it opened me up to the realm of, again, like, just talking and getting to know people, because I was very much a recluse in a way, and it forced that ability to, talk to people whilst you're there, and made me a bit more of a social butterfly in senses, I guess.
Yeah, I would say that about myself as well. Like, there'd be places that I wouldn't feel comfortable going, but if I had a camera with me, I might be all right. Like,
Yeah.
this sort of act as a shield, but can also pull you into situations as well. So it's kind of a bit of both worlds, like getting you into new social scenes, but you've got the comfort of your camera there. It's also like a talking point if there are any awkward moments. You're like, especially with film, because people are like, well, what are you up to? Or that's a cool old camera, or so and so had that back in the day. So
Yeah. I mean, it's like, for me, I don't really shoot 35mm anymore. I'm only really shooting medium format in regards to film. I love shallow depths of field. That's my problem. And again, naturally, the medium format cameras tend to be a lot bigger, a lot chunkier, and they kind of catch the eye a little bit more. And it is a conversation starter. It is. So I shoot a Mamiya RB67. It's kind of over there somewhere. You can't see it, but for me, that does gain quite a fair bit of attention, because again, it's a giant black box of a camera which you look down into, and a lot of people, although understand cameras, when they see something where you're looking for a waist level finder, it kind of confuses them.
yeah,
it is a talking point, and like, I quite often, if I'm doing a shoot, I like to hand the camera off to someone who I'm shooting, so they can see the backwards parallax effect that you're having with the image. Because they always find it really interesting and a bit of fun to see it goes backwards, which always seeing that reaction is great. So yeah, it is that wonderful talking point. And then, funnily enough, on your episode with Ribsy, he was talking about how a TLR is very much a talking point. And I at one point was using a Rolleicord Model 2. This thing was battered and bruised, held together with elastic bands, but still took a photo. And I even had it, I didn't have a proper strap for it at the time, so I was using a piece of twine. So I looked real country with it. Like, and yeah, so it was that kind of conversation starter. I remember hearing people walk past and then be like, oh, look at that old time camera. And then I'd be like, oh, do you want to have a little look? And just to see that kind of intrigue from people, because it's kind of weird how we're getting to an age now where a lot of people, at least in maybe like early 20s and younger, they don't actually know what film is or understand it. So I remember coming across someone, and I was using the Pentax 6.7 at the time, so obviously quite a large SLR, and they could obviously recognize that it was a camera. And this person asked me, where's the screen? And I was like, no, it shoots on film. And their response was, what's film? And it was this really alarming feeling, because I can't imagine being youthful and not having prints of photos of me when I was a kid. Like my dad had folders worth of photos of me as a child that you can actually physically look through.
Yeah.
But this generation doesn't have that, and it's kind
quite
of alarming.
Yeah, I think like the old school, just like 35 mil point and shoots, it's still sort of recognizable as a camera. But when you go back to like TLRs, a lot of people would think, oh, just what is that strange thing? Although
Yeah,
I'm sure now if you were to say to like a little kid, you know, take a photo, I would still probably mime like that, whereas a kid would probably
yeah,
react to like they had the smartphone or something. But
yeah,
I think there's something so nice about prints and physical photos. Like, I do wonder if families now, when they're taking all these photos, if they do just like live on their phone, or if they ever get those evenings like, oh, this was our holiday, like let's look through the album.
yeah.
I still think there's something really special about that.
I mean, I would hope that there's
Yeah,
still people doing that. Fingers crossed. I mean, I know you can, the average person can still go to Boots, I know, and get prints done if they really want to. Not saying that Boots is the best place to go for
yeah,
prints, obviously, but if you're not so serious onto it, then yeah, like I would hope there are still people doing that, you know. But
yeah.
and it's that physical, having that physical photo is another reason why I fell in love with the tintype process. Is because within that like 20 minutes after I take that photo, you have a physical image that you can walk away with. And for me, again, it harkens back to that feeling of having those photo albums and being able to go through and having those memories there. So it's the closest thing you can have to that, and except it's on metal instead, you know. So it just makes it that little bit different. But again, it is that physical element of having
Yeah.
a actual photograph in your hand and looking at it rather than looking at a screen, because I think we all spend a bit too much time on screens
Yeah,
these days, unfortunately.
absolutely.
And yeah, it's one of those things that if we can get someone away from screens just for a moment and just to have that moment to look at something physical and have that memory, I think there's something a bit sweeter about that. And that's what I was hoping to do with the analog spotlight event, was someone has the ability to walk away with something that goes, oh, I was at the inaugural spotlight event and I had this photo
Yeah,
done.
it's like a
Um,
souvenir.
yeah, exactly. So that was a really nice feeling as well. Just being able to give that to people, that opportunity. So, and again, just having that kind of like physical image to walk away with.
Yeah.
There's nothing more special than that.
It's definitely still one of the big appeals about film, I think. We had some of the guys from Vintage Camera Hut, they're a camera store in London, on, and one of them, Marius, was saying like, what are people going to do in the future? Just pass down their iCloud passwords? Like,
Oh,
are we going to share images with future generations? And I think it's such an interesting point. Like, our mum and dads might have had like photo albums or just handed over a folder of negatives, but this generation, like the way photos are going to be shared is just completely different.
yeah. I mean, it's that kind of worrying feeling that Instagram is going to hold on to absolutely everything,
Yeah.
essentially. So yeah, no, it is that kind of this the unfortunate thing about the digital age is, again, it's not that physical element, but I understand the ease of it, because I still remember my dad's albums of photos were taking up so much space because there were so many. But again, there is nothing better than that feeling of going through them. So I mean, because I don't have the greatest amount of space, I kind of pick and choose what I print. But obviously back then it was a fair bit easier just to be having just everything printed at the same time. It was also a hell of a lot cheaper back then.
Yeah.
So there is that aspect to it. But yeah, it's just I don't know. There's a satisfaction level which I don't think will ever be met again until the whole idea of prints becomes a big deal again, rather than just being a big wall hanging. Just having those small 6x4 inch prints in a wallet somewhere, you know. And I mean, I know there's still, like, obviously you've got Instax and stuff like that, which are kind of still keeping some of that alive. But then, let's face it, Instax doesn't exactly have the best quality, and sometimes you want that clarity to have a true memory of everything. But we do what we can do. I mean, I see my camera here as a bit of a Polaroid, I guess, but it's a little bit different.
Yeah.
a little bit more involved, but and a little bit more dangerous. But it's for me, having any kind of physical photography is always going to be superior. If there were a way for digital to do it and have a print come out straight away, then maybe I'd consider it. But
Mhm.
for me, it's never going to be the same. And
No.
having that opportunity to slow down a little bit. And again, that's another reason why I went to medium format and large format, was because having that capability just to take it a little bit slower, pick and choose, and then really take in that moment, it means a lot. And when I look back at photos from photo walks of friends of mine, most recently, I'm going to give them a little shout out. My friends Rick Pollitz and Gabe Kahn. We went to a little caravan park down in New Haven, and I think it's probably one of the nicest photo walks I've ever had in my life. Like, we just having a nice relaxing walk going across the cliff edge, and they it was a beautiful sunny day, beautiful sights, and you're never going to get that kind of feeling, I feel like, from the digital aspect of things, because when you get those scans back or the prints back, you get that instant, like, although it was only like a week ago, you get a small nostalgia kick from that week that reminds you of that. And I still get that every time I look at the photos from it. I mean, I only posted up 2 photos from that whole roll that I took, but for me, even though the other ones weren't particularly great, it still gives me that wonderful kind of like warming feeling inside to know that I had a great time and I had those memories. And you don't have to sift through thousands of photos from one trip. I kind of limit myself to generally 1 or 2 rolls so I can specifically choose what I'm going for. Hopefully, though, I might start taking this out on some photo walks. It'll be a little bit of a pain with my darkroom, but we'll get there. I mean, at least my darkroom has wheels, I guess. But
because you use what's the company called, Chromatica, the wet plate holders.
oh, chromographic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you have to develop the wet plate instantly, or could you take them back in those holders and develop it after?
So the reason why it's called the wet plate collodion process is it has to all be done whilst the plate is still wet.
Okay, that makes sense.
That's why I've got the darkroom, because unfortunately it does dry out in about 10 to 15 minutes. So you've kind of got to be quite quick with it. It does depend on humidity and stuff like that, but you generally have to be quite quick. That's why it is a relatively instant process, and why I have to, and it's why I have to drag around the darkroom, and that's why afterwards the wet plate process only kind of boomed from about the 1850s to the 1880s, because in the 1880s, George Eastman of the Kodak company, or Kodak Eastman at the time, he manufactured a way to mass produce the dry plate process. And the dry plates obviously meant you could do that. You could put your plate into a holder, shoot it, take it back home, and then develop it there. So it eliminated the issue of having to take around all your chemicals with you and having a darkroom with you wherever you went. You just had to load up your film backs, take your camera out, take as many photos as you've got, then go home and do it all. But for me, again, there is that ease of practice with it, but I like the involvement of having the wet plate process, of having to pour the collodion yourself, dip it in silver nitrate, and then having that capability to then develop it in front of someone, because I know a lot of people really enjoy watching it fix, so turning it from a negative to a positive is kind of a great experience for people to have. It's kind of similar to a Polaroid. As you watch the Polaroid come to, you get that great feeling of, oh, this photo's come out great.
Yeah, it's satisfying to be part of the whole process, from shooting it all the way through to the end.
Yeah, exactly. So for me, having that kind of availability to show people that kind of turning around of the image and watching their face light up essentially on the plate, and then also watching their face light up as they watch it, there is a wonderful satisfaction to it. But then on top of that, you're able to give a brief history lesson on how we got to where we are today with photography as a whole, because again, before that you had daguerreotypes, which weren't exactly practical and easy to do, and it also took quite long to take a photo, whereas this was like the first way to have portraits done in a very easy sense, as much as exposure times were still relatively long, being a couple of seconds. Like I blinded you for about 5 seconds whilst we were at the event. it's not minutes.
Yeah.
And there it's well, I know some daguerreotypes could even take up to an hour or so and stuff like that. Yeah, so it was the first way of people having that capability to take an image relatively quickly and again take photos of people. I don't think there was really many examples of photographs of people before the wet plate collodion process. I know the first example of a photograph taken of a person, I believe, was a daguerreotype taken in 1830s. I might be wrong on that one. I can't remember the exact date, but basically it's a photograph of a street, and the street, you can see in the distance there's this one dark figure, and it's a man who's getting his shoe polished.
Oh, I know that photo. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's technically the first photograph of anyone on any kind of photographic process. And again, it was more a spot of luck because those streets would have had people walking past, but as we know, with long exposure, it's just not going to get picked up. But that one gentleman happened to be stood there long enough getting his shoe shine that he was like imprinted on this image. It's funny to think. Oh, sorry, go on.
I was just going to ask, like, who taught you all this? Is it all self-taught? Did you have a studio you do all your photography in? Like, how did you get into it?
So I am completely self-taught. So I started researching the process about 3 or 4 years ago. So I was in university. I dropped out after about 3 or 4 months. It just wasn't for me.
What were you studying?
So I was studying photography.
Cool.
Weirdly, before that, I was studying mechanics and engineering. But yeah, so like I went to university and did photography, and I just found it wasn't for me. And I also noticed, unfortunately, that a lot of people who went through university all the way through, their passion for photography kind of died.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to have that happen to me, because even in the short amount of time I was there, I kind of felt it being sapped away. And that came from the course being kind of aimed towards digital markets, and that wasn't what I wanted to shoot, because I only shoot analog. I don't shoot anything else. So whilst I was there, I started looking into a bit more photographic history, because they weren't teaching that, and I always kind of wanted to know more about it. So I took it into my own hands to start learning more about photographic history, and then I came across the wet plate collodion process. And then through years of just researching in my own time, finding out all the chemistry involved with it, going on YouTube to look at tutorials, to look for the odd person who's still doing it here and there. I just took all those kind of factors and then eventually taught myself. And after about 3 years of doing those kind of elements of research, I just kind of gave into it and bought everything I needed for it. And I stupidly bought it all in winter, though, when we had no light. So I couldn't actually do anything until March, when we started getting some sunlight again. Because again, I haven't mentioned this yet, but to people who don't know, I'm working with an ISO rating of about 0.75. So basically it's something that's not reactive to light at all.
Yeah.
So I need a lot of light generally, otherwise my exposure times are extremely long. So I did take a photo of someone which was 70 seconds long. Fortunately, I had a head brace holding the head in place, and they managed to stay quite sharp. But yeah, it's generally you need that kind of a lot of light to eliminate that length of exposure. So yeah, when it came to March, I realized we started getting some sunlight, and I was like, right, we're going to do this. We're going to get on. So I converted my bathroom at one point into a dark room. So I was originally doing all my wet plate processing in my bathroom. Much to the dismay of my my partner at the time. They weren't too happy with that a lot of the time, taking up the bathroom. You know, they definitely weren't going to need it.
Knock you out.
So that's why I also then started developing my portable darkroom, because you don't need too much in the way of like darkroom materials. So I then created, as I said, this portable darkroom, which I now take out and about with me. But yeah, so from in March, I took my first one. It was a 15-second exposure, and it's blurry as anything, terrible. I did terrible pouring methods and stuff like that, but I had an image on a plate, and that was more than enough for me. Like, again, the image itself was far from being good, but just having an actual face on there was worth it for me. And then I just instantly fell in love with that kind of, again, the instant gratification of having that image appear before you and after putting in all that effort and work. And then I just was doing it non-stop. So I'd even sit in my living room until 10 o'clock at night with lighting all around, just taking still life shots of various dried plants I've got around the house. Just doing it as a way to practice and just keep working and keep doing it. I wasn't going to allow the lack of light to stop me. So I was doing exposure times up to about 3 minutes at times, just so I could get a photo. And some of them came out wonderful, if I'm honest. But for me, it was more about just knuckling down and getting the practice in, because after 3 or 4 years of research and finally starting it, I fell so in love with the whole process from the get-go, and just understanding how the chemistry itself works. So yeah, it's definitely something I'd recommend for people to try, just to understand the history of it. I can't imagine many people are going to want to do it as much as I do, because for one, it's incredibly dangerous, and also hauling around 30 kilos of darkroom all the time is not fun. But again, having that kind of final image is absolutely, it's wonderful. And just being able to sit there and again show this process to whoever I'm photographing, them having that involvement and seeing how it's all done, and just seeing how elated they are to see the whole process. For me, it just makes it so much more worth it. So yeah, I apologize if I'm waffling on.
No, it's really interesting. So what is the kit? Can you give us a rundown of the kit list that you need to make one?
Yes, so generally, so camera wise, you can use any camera you want. Yeah, so I'm actually going to be doing some stuff with half frame cameras soon. It's for a little project which I'm going to do. So hopefully no one steals my idea, but basically I want to do little half plate shots of like flowers and stuff like that, and then try and convert it into jewelry. So you have like little wet plates hanging off your ears or on as a pendant or something like that. So I'm going to be doing a little bit of work with that. I might be in chats with, so obviously we met them at the show, Alfie Cameras. They might be letting me have a little test run with one of their little half frames, so I might have a little go with that. But the one thing you need to take into account is whatever the size of your camera is the size of your image, especially if you're doing tintypes, because you can't enlarge. It is a direct print. So hence why I use the Intrepid 4x5 at the minute. Hoping to go to an 8x10 soon. I want big images, super shallow depths of field, but 4x5 is wonderful at the minute. So yeah, any camera will do. So I'm using an Intrepid 4x5, and I'm also using a Schneider 180 5.6. So that's roughly an equivalent to about a 70mm lens, so really good for portraits. On top of that, though, you need some sort of darkroom capability, because again, it needs to be done in darkroom. The fortunate thing is it can be done entirely under red light, so you don't have to do it in complete darkness, which is wonderful, because I have done one shoot in complete darkness, and it's really, really not easy. So on top of that, you need to then have your chemicals. So to start with, you need the collodion. So the collodion is essentially generally a mixture of nitrocellulose, alcohol, ether, cadmium bromide, and cadmium iodide. So the cadmium in that is quite carcinogenic, so it's quite dangerous and it's not very nice. That's why when I'm shooting, I'm wearing gloves and an apron, just because I need to make sure that I don't get any of that really on my skin too much. I can't say I'm perfect. It does still get there now and then, but it's a risk I'm willing to take. So yeah, but there are alternatives. You don't have to have cadmium-based collodions. There's certain ones out there which are now lithium-based, so they're not as carcinogenic. I have used lithium-based ones, but for me, I don't like the image it like creates. So I stick with a more traditional cadmium-based one. You can also use ammonia-based ones as well. So I know some people use ones with cadmium bromide and ammonium iodide as well. But yeah, so you take that, and then you need to have a substrate. So a substrate can be basically anything you want, as long as you can put collodion on it. So there are some people who even shoot collodion onto rocks. I don't know how they load that into a camera personally, but they've made it work. But for me, I shoot on tin, or aluminium. It's actually just trophy plaque metal, so the same kind of stuff you have on a trophy plaque and they engrave into. I use that because it has a black back on it, and that's what creates the positive image that you see. But you can also do what's called the ambrotype process as well, which is with glass. So tin types and ambrotypes tend to be like the main two that people will do. The benefit of shooting with glass, though, is it's a true negative, and you can actually print from it if you wanted to. But it would be a positive if you just put a black backing on it. So some people would put like a black velvet back on it or paint it with asphaltum. There's various methods. But again, tin for me is a bit easier to carry around because glass is a high risk with shattering, especially with a little rig like mine. But we're going to try some ambrotype soon, so keep an eye out for that. But yeah, so then once you have that, then you then have to dip your plate into silver nitrate. So you need a silver nitrate solution. It's a 9% silver nitrate solution that I use. And the plate is then dipped into that for 4 minutes. So I don't know if it will show up, but I've kind of got brown stains all over my hands. So this will come from the silver. I get it all over my hands and arms. It doesn't come off for a couple of weeks. The gloves aren't always perfect, to say the least, but the silver nitrate is essentially what sensitizes the plate. So the silver nitrate will react with the cadmium iodide and the cadmium bromide, and it creates silver iodide and silver bromide, which are silver halide salts that are reactive to light. It's the same salts that we still find in film today, so that's why it's very much a case of this is where photography as we know it is originated from. It's because it's still using the same base of silver that we still use today, even in color film. Once it's sensitized, you then have to have obviously some sort of holder to put your plate into. So if you're shooting with a 35mm camera, you don't necessarily need to have an actual holder. You can literally just take your camera into the darkroom, put the plate in the back, shut the back, take the shot. Yeah, so there is kind of some benefit. So if you want to start small, you can. But with obviously a 4x5, you have a separate back. So I've got a Chromographica back somewhere sat over there. Or you can convert actual film holders. So you can get like an old Toyo 4x5 film holder, cut the centerpiece out, and then create a like a plate holder that way. So there are options, but I wanted to support businesses that are making these things. So that's why I bought from Steve from Chroma, was I wanted to buy his dedicated back because it also supports someone who's starting up a business. And I fortunately got to meet Steve at the Spotlight event, which is quite nice.
Yeah, it was cool. You had like sort of all the businesses that had brought you together, but at the Spotlight, you had Intrepid were at the store opposite you as well.
Yeah, so I was based in their room so I could kind of showcase the camera for them.
Yeah.
And they were really sweet enough to give me a dark cloth as well because I was using a leather jacket beforehand. And yeah, I was using an old leather jacket as a dark cloth to hide under. So bless them, they gave me a little dark cloth so I looked a little bit more professional, I guess. Yeah, so the only other thing you would need from that point then is developer and fixer. So the developer is an iron sulfate based developer or a ferrous sulfate based developer. So I'm using one that's got like small amounts of like ferric acid in it. It's made with distilled water, and there's a couple of inorganic compounds in there as well. And then after that, you then have to use fixer. So I use a sodium thiosulfate fixer. So it's essentially hyperfixer. And then that's how you then turn the image to a positive. So the great thing is the developing only takes about 20 seconds. It's a very, very short development time, and you only have to use 20 mils of developer at a time. So I actually use a little shot glass from a pub. And I just use that to pour my developer on. It's perfect size. And then, as I said, you can take it out whilst it's a negative and fix it and watch it turn to a positive before your eyes. The last thing you then need is a varnish of some sort, because essentially the image itself is a fragile film on the top of the metal plate, and it's basically like salt. You want to then obviously varnish that plate so you don't tarnish it. So I use a Sandarak varnish, which is a mixture of gum sandarak, which is ground down trees from like Africa. I think it's North Africa, it's like Morocco region. And it's then also got a little bit of lavender oil, alcohol, and distilled water. Yeah,
that one.
It's wonderful, and just being able to have that lavender smell all the time is so great. So yeah, basically you'd also need some sort of heating element. So when you're varnishing the plate, you need to heat the plate up before you put the varnish on, and then heat it up again after you put the varnish on to then burn off the excess alcohol, so then all the oil and gum sandarac sits on the surface. So I currently use a alcohol burner. Nice and simple thing. You can buy them for like £6 off Amazon. They're really not hard to get a hold of. But before that, I was actually using a hairdryer. So you just need something that can heat it. Except we don't recommend that you use stuff like candles because they kind of have smokiness to the flame. You want something that's going to be a bit more clean, so then you don't tarnish the image. So yeah, it's a bit of an involved process. There's quite a few chemicals going on. Most of them are very explosive, flammable, and carcinogenic. So it's not advised really to be careless with them. It was quite back in the day, and when you were making these kind of images, it was actually regarded as one of the most dangerous forms of work going, because you're quite often again using very, 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 very dangerous chemicals. And if you were to go to the most traditional version of a fixer, you were using potassium cyanide. So obviously having cyanide on you is not always the smartest plan either. So yeah, fortunately there's no cyanide in my setup. There's no chance of me accidentally poisoning anyone, so that's always good. But yeah, it is a very hard technique, and there is a lot of like actual pouring techniques that you need to learn to get a good image. But there's plenty of information out there to actually learn. There are two main people I always kind of recommend people look at. One of them's a man called Quinn Jacobson. He's essentially he's the best all-round knowledge of collodion in the world, I would say, at the moment. I've actually got a book of his down there. And he also runs a Facebook group for collodion. So there's always still a community of people doing this that you can kind of chat with and troubleshoot any issues with. But the main person I was actually watching when I first started learning was a guy called Justin Borucki. He does a lot of street photography, and that's where I got the idea of doing a portable darkrooms, because he had this like trolley with these big wooden crates on it that he turns into a darkroom. And he even spoke about how his first darkroom was a cardboard box with bin liners, and that's good enough to work. Yeah, so you don't have to have super expensive stuff. So I know some people make custom portable darkrooms that cost over £1,000. My portable darkroom I think I made for about £150, and it's literally a black toolbox and a black trolley. That's all it is.
The new Ilford pop-up darkrooms that they launched earlier this year.
So, I'd really like to try one.
I thought they might have had one with them at the Spotlight, but I don't think they did. But
they did.
Did they?
They did, but they offered it to me just after I set up my darkroom, and I was like, it's going to be a bit of time for me to pack it down and put it into a new darkroom. So they were very sweet. They did offer, but I didn't have the time, unfortunately. But I would love to try one.
Yeah, they look cool. So when you do this at home, do you just do it in your bathroom, the darkroom?
No, I still use my portable setup. Just because the other thing is if I have spillage or anything like that, at least it's inside my little toolbox. It's not on the floors, because again, not only does it stain my skin brown, it will stain a lot of other things brown too. And it's very, very hard to get off. So I do kind of limit myself to my little indoor rig, I guess. But again, the great thing about it is I can take it anywhere. So I'm hoping to do some pop-ups along Brighton seafront at some point soon. And then that way it'll be like a kind of like roll up, come get your portrait taken kind of thing. So yeah, it gives me that kind of more flexibility and freedom, especially if I want to do like landscape work as well.
Yeah, and are the chemicals hard to get hold of? Where do you get all the chemistry from?
So currently I'm buying my chemistry from the Czech Republic. Yeah, so it's a bit of a pain. Customs will really get you on that one. But I'm hoping to start sourcing a lot of the raw chemicals in the UK, and then starting to do a little bit of experimentation with mixing my own kind of recipes, and then seeing, because there's so many different variations of collodion. There's various different developers you can use, and they all achieve different looks for your image. So I want to start toying around, doing a little bit more chemistry of my own, to then try and find my perfect image. So I'm currently using a collodion called LEA number 3. It's a portrait collodion, as they call it, and I've been having wonderful results with that. But I still want to have something that's kind of like my own special recipe, you know.
That's cool.
Yeah, so we'll get there with time. I just need to get a proper chemistry set up. So I'm going to be moving soon. So when I move, I'm going to have like a little lab set up as well, so I can start doing that.
Wow, that's crazy. You'll be part of the process from start to finish. Have to make a little recipe book for all of us.
I'll have to share the trade secrets.
Yeah,
Yeah.
my wet plate with me actually. I wanted to show it off. What do you do with your wet plates? Do you frame them? Like, how do you display them?
So the best way to do it is to generally have some sort of stand.
Yeah.
So you can get various like wood block stands, or you can get like metal frame hangers, kind of things that are really, really good for it. But they can go in frames. It's just you've got to be careful with the fact that over time the varnish might stick to the glass. So it could be a case of that it might permanently be in that frame. But the other option is if you get a frame that fits it perfectly, you don't have to have the glass on the front. It can just have an edging frame that you can hang. So there are various options for it, or you can just straight hang the plate if you really want to. So that there are definitely options that you can do. But the one thing I always recommend to people though is when you do position them anywhere, try your best to avoid having it in direct sunlight, just because it can degrade the image quicker, just like any print. Having it in direct sunlight will degrade it quicker. So just try and avoid that, just to make it last a little bit longer, I guess. But for the most part, it should last centuries. Fingers crossed.
Cool. It still smells so good.
Just has that beautiful lavender smell.
Yeah. I was when I left it behind, and I was like, no, it's lost forever. But Hamish managed to check the CCTV for me and saw it just sat on the desk as you come in. So he posted it to me yesterday.
I'm glad you still got it then.
Yeah, so cool. It will just be such a nice thing to look back on. It's just, so it was amazing to see you there doing it.
Yeah, I said I was I was overwhelmed by the response that I got from it, and the fact that, to be fair, I had a sign-up sheet for the day, and sign-up sheet was pretty much filled within 20 minutes of me starting. And I must admit, I got a little bit. I thought I could do with each of them in 15 minutes, but I probably should have said 20. So I did get a little bit backed up. But it was a great day nonetheless. And honestly, even though I didn't take a break and didn't really have much chance to even eat or drink, I didn't feel it felt like it was only about an hour long. I was just having so much fun. Yeah. And just having those conversations with everyone that was coming in, like even if people weren't getting their photo taken, they were just standing there listening to me ramble on about wet plate photography and my history of photography. And it was a wonderful experience. It really, really was. So I'm really looking forward to hopefully being involved in some more events in future, giving everyone else a bit of a chance to hopefully get their portrait taken too. As I said, I've got a couple of people who were at the Spotlight event who are actually going to be coming down to Brighton to essentially basically just come and get a portrait done by me. And that's I just can't believe that, to be fair. Cool. But it's a great feeling. And we're also going to do some photo walks as well, where I'll take out the Lumiere. So
it was like figuring out what pose to do that I found the hardest thing, because you had to sit still for like 8 seconds. You have to stay still.
It was about 5-6 seconds, yeah. Everyone was wondering whether they should smile or not, and it's the funny one was people trying not to blink, and they're not realizing that you can get away with having a blink. Like it's not going to make a difference because the exposure is so long anyway. But hopefully next time though, I will have a little bit of a better lighting rig to work with, which means hopefully, if I can, I'll be able to drop the exposure times down to about maybe half a second. But it will mean having about 8,000 watts of power going on, so it might hurt a bit more. People say it's like being baptized by light, so we'll see. But that's the plan. So basically, the money that was made from doing the event is basically being put straight back into me being able to produce more and having that availability, because the eventual goal for me is by the end of the year, I would love to have my own little studio set up here in Brighton, where you can just come in off the street and come and get your portrait taken. Fingers crossed.
Did you have to do like a first like test exposure on the day, or do you sort of know what's happening?
So I did take one test exposure, and it was of my dad actually, because
Huh.
he drove me up, bless him. He came along. He offered to help set up, but I just don't like people touching the horrible chemicals. I'll leave that down to me. But he sat down and we did a test exposure. It was a 3 second exposure. Came out a little bit underexposed, so then I accounted for it. The big issue it is a fair bit of guesswork because essentially the process itself is only sensitive to two wavelengths of light. It's only responds to blue and UV. So a light meter only works so much because a light meter generally picks up all forms of light. So I
Uh,
have to kind of account for that.
mm,
But then also because the ISO is so low, there's no real light meters that go at that low. So when I'm metering, I'm generally metering if I'm lucky, if I have something that can allow me to meter for one ISO,
yeah.
I'll be metering for that. But generally, I'm metering ISO 3 at f36, and that will be my exposure at f5.6. So
Mm,
it's still quite a world away from that, but you kind of do learn the kind of exposure times. But the other problem is exposure times can differ depending on what collodion you use as well. Um, so certain collodions are known to be quicker than others, like certain recipes. So you do have to account for that, and you do have to kind of know what you're working with. So a little bit of practice isn't kind of ideally needed for any time you're doing a shoot. So if I'm shooting, I kind of have a rough idea of what I work with, but I always like to do one test exposure first if I can.
mm,
Hence why I blinded my father as well whilst we were down there. So yeah, it's guesswork, but
yeah.
it's having a rough idea. So it's not too much of a guess.
Mm,
But there is a learning curve to the exposure times. And I think naturally coming from the analog side of things, and I quite often like to use kind of low ISO film stocks anyway, you naturally kind of learn what exposure times you're looking for. So yeah, it's a hard one, but
yeah.
it's fun. It makes it that much more rewarding when you do get a exposure which comes out well.
Mm,
So yeah, I can't recommend it enough, and I'm hoping so. After the event went down so well, Intrepid are obviously opening up a studio soon. They've already asked me to come along and maybe do some workshops at some point, so it'll give me the opportunity to actually firsthand show people how to create the plates at hand. So fingers crossed, there'll be a chance for me to pass on the information that I do know. And again, the one thing is it's a process where you're always learning. I don't think anyone's going to ever truly have a full grip on it because so many different things can go wrong. You can't ever guarantee certain results, and as the chemistry ages, things change in the
yeah.
image and stuff like that. So yeah, it's one of those things that I can only pass on as much as I know and the techniques that I know. Where someone goes from there, it's going to be their experience. And to be fair, there's many people who might not go on to do much more with it because there is a lot more involvement and there is a lot of equipment to carry around if you are going to do it, especially if you're not set up in a studio. So it's not for everyone, but I still think it's an experience everyone should maybe try, especially if they
Yeah.
are in the analog world, because it's just for me, it's knowing what the passion we have for analog photography. It's I think it's always nice to know where it has come from,
Yeah.
at least in the form that we know it as today. So
Mm,
hopefully we can pass on that information to people.
yeah. 100%. Another factor I thought was interesting to talk about was like metering for different skin tones. Because I think Alicia got a portrait taken with you, and unfortunately, I think she had one taken earlier in the day on the Afghan camera, and it just didn't come out well at all. So Alicia is the co-owner of Lensfair. She makes the snap cameras and refurbishes cameras and sells lots of cool things. And she's got a darker skin tone. So when you were talking to her about getting that right, you were just explaining how you'd have to sort of meter that differently to accommodate that.
Yeah, so again, it only picks up certain wavelengths of light. it's naturally going to struggle to pick up darker shades of skin.
Mm.
So I wanted to make sure I got a photo of Alicia whilst we were there, because basically
Yeah.
Alicia's been a big supporter of my work. So before, so I have two accounts now, which is Wet Plate Willow, obviously, and Willow Color. Before that, I had a separate account which had a decent following, but I kind of grew tired of it, so I removed it. But even on that account, Alicia was a big supporter of my work and would very frequently share my work through Lensfair. So naturally, when I started doing the wet plate process and the doing all my film work on Willow Color, she was still sharing all that kind of work. So I have mass appreciation for her. So I wasn't going to let her get away with not having a photo taken. But yeah, it is one of those things where it doesn't pick up certain wavelengths of light. It's going to naturally struggle to pick up like darker skin tones. So I had to account for it. So with most of the portraits I took that day, which most of the demographic who were there were people of lighter skin tone, so generally like kind of Caucasian white people.
Yeah.
I was generally working with a 5-second exposure, but for Alicia, I had to push it to about 7 or 8, just to again get that refined detail within the skin. And it's only a couple of seconds difference. It's not a massive change, but you do have to account for that. So I also had to do a similar thing when I took the group photo outside. I had to try and find the perfect balance of the lighter skin tones of Alicia's skin tone. And again, that's just rough guesswork. So the group photo that I took, it was the one-off. I didn't do another one. That was just the only one I took, and I was pretty chuffed with how it came out, to be fair.
Yeah, it was so good.
But there are other certain things that you can do to kind of help that. So when you're developing the plate in the room, I say room, my tub. When I was developing it in my tub, basically you can watch the image slowly come onto the plate, and basically from that I could figure out who was who on the plate, and then I can actually develop a little bit more in certain areas. So it's kind of, I think it is noticeable on the plate itself, but there is like a kind of what looks like a light leak streak going across Alicia, and that wasn't actually a light leak. That was me holding the developer a little bit more over Alicia, because then that way it can bring those kind of skin tones out a little bit more. So these are kind of, again, the little methods that you do learn from just practicing with it. So before the event, I've only unfortunately had one other opportunity to shoot someone with darker skin tones. It was actually a shoot for someone and their kids, and their skin tones weren't as dark as Alicia's, but it was still like, again, a learning curve with that, and I got quite lucky with it. But again, it is that kind of constant learning method, and everyone's looks different, everyone's skin tone's different, how light works is different. So every shot you're taking, it's not as simple as just choosing your exposure time and choosing your aperture. I also have to choose my development time and stuff like that, just like you would with film stocks, except because the development is so quick, there is a very small leeway going on. So most of the time I'm developing for 15 to 20 seconds, but I've had shots where I've accidentally developed for 25 seconds and it's just washed out. So that even just a 5-second change can really tarnish an image and ruin it. So it is a harsh learning curve, but again, do your research correctly, speak to the right people, you're going to know what you're doing.
I was really pleased that she firstly sat for the portrait, because I could tell after the last experience she was like a bit nervous, and to see that it came out really well. But I also thought it was really good that you sort of acknowledged it and like just made her feel comfortable, talked her through the process, and you know, acknowledged it and walked us through the process and to everyone in the room, so we sort of knew and were learning about that kind of factor to bear in mind. So part of the analog spotlight was about diversity in film, and you know, bringing a whole community together and trying to get different backgrounds and different people all in one place. And I think just little things like that are so important. Like, it's not okay to just, you know, shoot as if it's only one type of person in the world. Like, we've talked about it with other people on our channel, how you have film stocks like Portra and it says, you know, designed for skin tones, and it's like, well, what skin tones are you talking about? Probably just white ones, because you know, it's not always taken into account. So I just thought it was, a good conversation to have. And when we're talking about portraiture, it should be, the whole scale of people from light to dark skin tone. So I was like glad you acknowledged that when you were taking her photo. I thought that was really good.
Yeah, again, I don't want people to. I didn't want anyone to walk away essentially with an image they weren't happy with. I mean, Alicia was worried that she frowned a little bit too much in her one, bless her. But I actually, throughout the entire day, I only had one error with a plate, which it was a lovely gentleman from Wales. I believe his name was Reese, and he was really patient with me, bless him, because as soon as I realised it was wrong, I was like, right, we're doing another one straight away.
Yeah.
I went to start doing the other one, but yeah, it is that thing where so like there is that kind of issue with older photographic methods. They are, especially when you go to like orthochromatic films and stuff like that. Again, it does struggle with darker skin tones, and again with the portrait issue, again saying it's great for skin tones. I've always found for darker skin tones, Fuji Pro 400's always been better for darker skin tones, and I think that comes from again the color balance that it naturally has. So it's naturally seeing that Kodak put that forward as being better for skin tones, I do personally agree is kind of wrong, because it is that issue of they are kind of whitewashing everything, I guess, in a sense, and it does become a bit of an issue. And like yourself and everyone else who was involved there, I love to see diversity in our field. So although I have a very masculine appearance, I'm non-binary queer, and I, especially within the wet plate community, at least, I don't know anyone who has that similar kind of under the spectrum of trans, I guess, doing it. So there is that lack of diversity in even different sectors of the analog community. So most of the people who are doing the wet plate process are generally elderly white men, and that does. Yeah, and you do get there's some wonderful female artists doing it. So over in America, there's two outstanding people. There's a woman called the Alchemistress, and there's another one called the Silver Sunbeam. They are incredible artists, and one of them uses a 40-inch camera. The thing is gigantic, like it takes massive plates. She has to drive it around in a pickup truck, and her work is stunning, absolutely gorgeous. And I love to see it that it's not limited to this kind of like middle-aged to elderly white folk kind of thing. It's these middle-aged kind of white women who are doing this work, and it's wonderful. And then there's also been bless her name has gone away from me now, unfortunately, but there was a project that I've been keeping up with recently, and it's a woman who's doing a wet plate book, and it's all about people of Black heritage and their stories, and it's showing them through the wet plate process. And I think that's an absolutely wonderful thing to do, because the great thing with the wet plate process is it shows great detail, but then also if you get the exposures right, the contrast detail between is outstanding, and I think it looks beautiful on darker skin tone. It really does. And this woman's done this wonderful book, so I don't think she's quite released it yet, but from what I've seen of it, it has a photo and then it has the story going alongside it, like a whole page of this person's story and their life leading up to this point. And I think that's an absolutely wonderful project to do, because again, it's showing that diversity within the community as well, and just again showing that you can photograph anyone, even if the process makes it harder. It doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. So, and again, going on in regards to representation, with my kind of non-binary orientation in my life, I'm looking to start doing a project at some point soon where, because again, going back to the original method of photography when it was the 1850s, there weren't, at least it wasn't very open to be like non-binary, trans, or anything like that. And I want to do a whole project where I take photos of people who are under that spectrum. And I want to show them as themselves, not someone who has to hide who they are. So that's something I'm going to actually be developing at some point soon. I'm hoping to do it on 8x10 once I get an 8x10 camera. So yeah, for me, again, having that kind of representation within the community is great, and that's why I absolutely love the fact that you're doing your photo walks as well.
Thank you.
No, that's quite all right. But it is that, like, everyone should have their place. and
Yeah.
there shouldn't be a barrier to anything. Like, it doesn't matter who you are, what you do, or anything like that.
Mm.
Everyone should be ready and accessible to do it. So that's why, again, when I had Alicia there, for me it didn't matter if it was necessarily going
Yeah.
to be a harder photo to take. I I wanted her to be able to walk away with something, and again, I wanted to show my appreciation for her and all the
Mhm.
support she's given me throughout the time that I've been doing my photography, and all the support that she's given to everyone else. Like,
Yeah.
she's kind of hidden behind the scenes a lot of the time, and I think she
Yeah,
should show herself a little bit more, bless her.
definitely.
Um, so yeah, for me, again, that there shouldn't be any boundaries to it.
Yeah, it just goes without saying.
Mm,
Have you
so
found
again, say again,
that,
sorry.
have you found that in doing sort of such a traditional type of photography, although it might be quite alternative now because not many people are doing it, have you faced any sort of not backlash but criticism about, you know, the right way to do things and because it's such a traditional method?
I haven't, no. But then for me, it's a case of the wet plate community as a whole. So I am part of some groups of people who are still doing wet plate. A lot
Mm.
of people are kind of more so doing it in their back gardens, doing it as like a hobby kind of thing. And I've only had people appreciate my work, but then I don't necessarily within the people who are doing it, I don't necessarily show my setup, I guess.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of people who are doing it, they're using antique cameras or original ones made back in the 1800s with old Petzval lenses and stuff like that. And you do get a wonderful image from that and you get a more traditional look. But I like the tack sharpness that you kind of get with the more modern
Mm.
photo. And again, if someone's going to take something home, I feel like they'd also prefer to have that kind of tack sharpness rather than being something that's a little bit more artsy and out there and soft
Yeah.
focus. I like a good, strong, sharp focus. That's why for even my Mamiya, for my portraits, I use the 140 macro lens because I like that kind of tack sharpness you get with it. So that's
Mm.
why I've got a little bit more of a modern lens with the Schneider that I'm using on mine. But I've not had any backlash in regards to it. I suppose the other thing is as well is a lot of people within that community, I guess, don't know about my orientation. I guess it's not something I've openly spoken about, not because I'm trying to hide it, but it's just not been a need.
Yeah.
We're just talking about the imagery we're producing, but it is definitely very much filled by middle-aged to elderly white men. So I don't know how they would feel. Is again, that tends to also be a demographic that has generally a larger kind of area for I don't know.
Opinion.
Yeah. So yeah, it is one of those things. But
Yeah.
for me, I want to show people that it doesn't matter who you are, you can do it. And the other thing I wanted as well with someone like Alicia and anyone who was there getting their photograph taken is you get these people who are always like, oh, I'm not photogenic, and always kind of like, everyone's photogenic. Everyone is beautiful, right? In their own right. There's no such thing as a beautiful standard. Everyone is themselves. Everyone's stunning, and everyone can have a beautiful photo taken of them. And that's what I want to do with my portraiture, because where you don't have much chance to pose yourself too much because you have to concentrate on being still, you're more you. And I think everyone should be proud of themselves. They shouldn't mask themselves by doing like a certain pose or trying to put themselves in a certain way. I want to show someone as they are, because why not if you're a beautiful person in general? Like, and the great thing about the process as well is it shows, like, because it's again blue light and UV light, you kind of see yourself in a more ethereal kind of vibe. The skin tones look a little bit different. And there's that super sharp clarity that comes with a 4x5 inch image anyway. And there is something so beautiful about that. And there is a more personal touch to it as well. So with the tintype process, the image is flipped because you're not able to essentially turn the image around and have the black backing on the other side. It's still a backwards image. So when you look at that image, you're looking at your mirror self like the same way you see yourself in the mirror every morning. And I think it gives it that more personal vibe and that more like wonderful personal appeal. And for me, being able to show people that yes, you can have your photo taken, don't think you can't, is wonderful. Because I've whilst doing this process, I've come across so many people who they're like, oh, I'm not photogenic, but I'd love to get the photo taken so I can see the process. And then they see the photo afterwards and they're like, oh my God. And I'm like, well, yeah, you are beautiful. Because the other thing is as well is if you've got someone who knows what they're doing behind the camera, they are going to make you look great.
Yeah.
And for me, what I want to do is show people in their best light. I don't want to show someone in a bad light. I want to show them and make them proud of who they are. So, and that's I think a wonderful thing that does happen with this is they don't concentrate necessarily on hiding themselves. They concentrate more on what's going on. It takes them away from being like, oh, I need to look like this. I need to be perfect and all this kind of lot. It's those imperfections that make it so beautiful. And it's the same with people in general. It's our imperfections that make us who we are. There is no such thing as a perfect person. So embrace those imperfections. Like, I mean, I'm not perfect by any stretch of the word, you know, like, and still I'll still take my own photo as much as I'm not a big fan of it. I always find myself appreciating it a little bit more when I can kind of actually see that image taken.
Yeah.
So yeah, for me, I just want to build that confidence in other people at the same time as showing them a wonderful, wonderful process that got us to where we are today, and us having this huge passion for analog photography. So yeah, it's
thank you so much, Willow.
No, that's quite all right.
You just said. I know you have to be off fairly soon, so if you're ready, we'll move
we can do some judging. Yeah, I need to stop waffling so much.
No, it's so interesting. So I've been enjoying learning about it. So we're gonna start the photo competition judging now. Willow has picked, I think, 6 special mentions, and we have our winner and lucky dip winner, of course. And you will be getting a Analog Wonderland voucher to get some goodies. So when Willow is ready, we will start with the first special mention.
Okay, so I'll let you choose which one we go for first.
So I'm going to go for this one by Alex Gunn.
Oh, have I got names here? Oh, is that the mirror one?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, lovely.
What did you like about this photo?
See, for me, I always have I love a self-portrait. Because again, naturally being photographers, we kind of naturally hide ourselves behind our cameras a lot of the time. So I like it when someone puts a personal touch of themselves in there somewhere, be it a shadow or themselves in a mirror. I always appreciate that. But the other thing for me is I also love the beautiful use of depth of field and things being out of focus. So I love this figure holding the mirror being out of focus. It kind of gives it a more of a weird. Say again, sorry?
That's my favorite part. I like how it's a faceless mannequin as well, I think.
Yeah, it gives it this weird kind of creepiness to it, I guess. But yeah. I was raised on horror films, so for me, creepiness is great. But yeah, and it is just that kind of personal touch, and it's there's one little thing that for some reason I always noticed, but there was this look, just there's that person in the back left-hand corner, and it kind of has this kind of, again, eerie vibe because they're so far off in the corner of the image.
Yeah.
So yeah, but and also the composition of it all, having that mirror in that kind of traditional thirds placement, I guess.
Yeah.
It hits those kind of traditional compositional notes that sometimes tickle the brain nicely. But yeah, and again, for me, it's just having that kind of that personal touch of being able to see who took this photo in there. It gave me like a very nice sensation, I guess.
So this photo is titled "A Very Obliging Mannequin," which I really like the title for. I think that's really fun.
I love that. That's brilliant.
It was taken on Fomapan 100, and Alex says it has a really nice subdued contrast, gives a lovely retro feel. And this was taken on a busy day at a market in Bristol. I like how the timing, position and size of the mirror worked out just right for this spontaneous snap. Cool.
Yeah, I've got to agree. That mirror placement's wonderful.
Yeah.
I really adore it. And I've not had much chance to shoot Fomapan, actually. I've only shot one roll of it on medium format, but I'm looking to do some large format work with it because it's relatively cheap compared to Kodak. But yeah, I do like the kind of reduced contrast tone that you get with it. It looks like you would have a lot of flexibility if you were to shoot it, that you could adjust those contrast tones to your liking depending on how you develop it. But again, unfortunately, I just don't have much experience with Fomapan myself. But this shot's definitely kind of making me think, oh, maybe.
So well done to Alex. Love that photo.
Yeah,
The next one we have is by Anisha, and this photo is called Contentment.
Oh, please remind me what the image looks like.
One of the couple, I think they're on a boat.
Oh, with the yellow coat.
Yellow anorak, yeah.
Yes. Okay. Lovely. Yeah, I've got that one up. So for me, I must admit, my favorite color is yellow. So kind of a little bit biased on this one, I must admit. But also, I love just the kind of very natural pose. Well, again, it's not posed; it's candid, but just that kind of sense, that feeling of care and love in that image. But then also, if we're going again by traditional means of photography, the leading lines. There's so many leading lines just pointing at these people, and it's just this outstanding view. And then you've got this wonderful like landscape in the back of these beautiful trees and the crisp blue water. But on top of that, it's just the tonality. Like, I love the color palette. The color tones are gorgeous. And again, having that yellow in there is always going to tickle me right. Like, I love me some yellow. Any chance to see some yellow in a photo, I'm happy. So, but yeah, that one's probably why it caught my eye just a little bit extra. It's just because of the yellow. But again, just those leading lines just do it for me, and just the natural content moment that you can see in them.
Yeah, it looks like a really sweet, tender moment between the couple, I assume.
Yeah.
So that was taken on Portra 400.
Oh, of course.
Yeah, you can tell by those tones straight away. Anisha says it's the best film she's ever used so far. So it's a pretty good review for Portra.
I mean, there's a reason why it costs so much, I guess.
Yeah. So about this photo, Anisha says, everyone strives for a certain level of contentment, and to see that emotion captured in film form is beautiful. Oh, that's really sweet.
Oh, I agree. Again, it's those sweet moments that I love seeing captured. Again, just showing the kind of gentleness of the human race at times, because let's face it, we're not always the best, but these kind and gentle moments I think really do stand out, especially when you get them kind of beautifully lined up like this. Absolutely wonderful photo.
So the next one we have is by Darian Hollywood, and this photo is called Stage Front.
Oh, is that the theatre one?
No, I think it's like the concert one.
Oh yes, of course, yes, the black and white one. So yeah, for me, there's something I absolutely love in the contrast of this image, like the really, really deep black with the really harsh white. I absolutely adore that, and just this. You can see how this front man is really going for it and really wanting to put on a show. The only thing that I would put a small thing on is the symbol being in the way just kind of cuts it a little bit for me, but everything else about this image is incredible. I love it. I just wish that symbol wasn't there, but sometimes we have to shoot what we can shoot. Like, you can't pick and choose all the time. But
we needed to just crop it slightly, just to focus in on that face a bit more. But the atmosphere in the video is amazing. I love it.
Yeah, and so I used to play a lot of music myself. I used to play shows and stuff like that. So I think there's a kind of, it hits my soul a little bit because my feeling of being back on stage. But again, there's just something about that raw emotion you can see in this person doing their singing. It's adore it. I adore it. I really do. And again, that beautiful tonal range that you're getting there. Well, I suppose lack of tonal range, the high contrast. Being someone who loves kind of like Kodak Tri-X when it comes to black and white film, I like quite a harsh contrast. So yeah, I absolutely adore this photo. I really do. And I think honestly, if this symbol wasn't there, it might have tipped up the top maybe. But it's unfortunately just again, we work with what we can get. Not everything's going to be perfect. So
this was taken on JCH Street Pan, which is known for being quite a contrasty film, but Darian actually pushed it to 1600. And he says he was pleasantly surprised by how well this film pushes with relatively fine grain, and recommends to have a go with it at night. Considering that's been pushed so much, I think the image looks great. Like, it doesn't even look too grainy.
No, I agree. Like, I wouldn't have thought that was pushed that far. That's incredible. So that might be. I might have to have a little look at that myself, actually. But that's because I remember shooting like 3200, like Kodak 3200 and stuff like that, and the grain level on that is just horrible. So seeing that you can kind of get this out of stuff like that, I mean, maybe I'll have to give that a try, I think.
So this was Darian's first time he's used film for a concert or in the dark, and he says he was really happy about the sharpness, given that I was in a mosh pit. The OM10 held up. I love the contrast and how this captures the animated features of the singer-drummer. And so that's very impressive, like, to have a SLR camera with you as well, not even a point and shoot.
Yeah, I was going to say, even a rangefinder would be handier for that situation. Yeah. I mean, that's someone after my own heart there, taking an OM10 to a show and getting live shots on black and white film. I mean, that's, again, just that symbol. I'm sorry, it's the symbol. It just doesn't quite tip it for me. I'm sorry. Otherwise, it would have been up there. Hearing the OM10s involved, again, it just hits the heart.
So, next photo we have is by Miles. I don't know if you met Miles at the Spotlight, but he runs Expired Film Club. So he sells Miles Harris. I can't even say his last name. Myers Scoff Harris. Yeah, he runs Expired Film Club and sells loads of different expired films.
Yeah.
Very cool. So this is the theatre one that you mentioned earlier.
Oh, yes. This has got to be 800T, surely.
Yeah, you're right. You can just
the halation,
can't you?
Yeah, that halation gives it away every time. But again, he's using it in the right area. It's you've got these beautiful lighting situations. So yeah, 800T just pops. But I also love the musician just stood there, kind of like, again, longingly looking before going into the theatre. There's just something, again, those kind of relatively empty streets. He looks kind of very solid, in like a lot of solace there, and I like because the whole kind of straight down the pathway has that kind of leading point to the gentleman with the guitar. So I really appreciate it. But it also gives me vibes of there's a film Inside Llewyn Davis, where it's all about this folk artist who it's just him and his guitar a lot of the time, and I just feel like that would fit perfectly into that film. And again, 800T just gives a beautiful cinematic vibe. So
looks like he's doing an audition or something. He looks a bit nervous.
Yeah, and it's
really cool.
The fact that he's kind of longingly looking up and maybe even seeing what time it opens or something like that. It's a beautiful image. It really is. And again, the perfect use of 800T. Like, if you're gonna use it, this is the way to use it.
Oh, so about this film, Miles says, as you can see with the first photo of this set, Cinestill is susceptible to static discharge, which causes lightning-like artifacts on the negatives. I've never heard of that before.
I noticed that on the other one, because I saw that he put another one in there, and I saw down the bottom the lightning thing, and it made me think about Revelog.
So he says he's since learned that this is done by winding the film on too vigorously, so be careful. Sometimes it can turn out pretty cool though. I particularly like the Stranger Things vibes it caused on that shot. Oh, I've never seen that before. I'll have to go back and have a look.
Yeah, it's just like down at the bottom of the frame. It's really interesting. I mean, it's not like the blue electric that Revelog does. Fortunately, it's red. But it was really cool, to be fair. But yeah, I get the kind of Stranger Things vibes that he's on about as well. I definitely see that. But then with Cinestill, you're always going to kind of get that beautiful like 80s kind of vibe, aren't you? So
Yeah, the halations. Oh, cool.
stunning.
So our next one is by Susie Jones.
It's the double exposure, isn't it?
Yeah, this one's really cool. At first I thought it was like a first of the roll because it almost looks like that sort of burning of the film.
Yeah. See, that's what really caught my attention, was the fact it had that almost burn feel to it.
Yeah.
But then you take that kind of second look and you go, oh wait, this is actually a double exposure. And it's the fact that she's perfectly gone with the idea of a double exposure. So using those negative spaces to fill in the gaps. For me, I think if you're going to do a double exposure, this is the right way to do it. The only thing that I would have a qualm with is just maybe having a little bit of a better exposure for the leaves. But then naturally, if you're going to try and blot out the sun and make it a bright white background, you're going to have to kind of underexpose at times. But yeah, again, for me, it's that perfect use of negative space for the double exposure, and that burn-esque feel around the edge is stunning, and she's done a wonderful job with it. She really has.
So Susie says, try out a double exposure, always fun. And she likes that the image is both stark and soft. I've never done much double exposure before. I have a few rolls that I'm planning to double expose, but I've always heard the tip is to half your exposure, so that when you shoot it again, you've got the correct exposure for that film. But yeah, definitely worth having a go.
Oh yeah, 100%. And again, if you want to kind of get those natural, like having an area filled out, the best way to do it is like if you're going to have someone and you want to have like a leaf kind of vibe going on, or a floral vibe inside them, you want to basically just really, really underexpose their skin, so they kind of just a silhouette, and then blow out the background as much as you can to make it bright white. So then when you do an overlaying image, the image is already burnt out from the outside, and then you just fill in that dark space. So and again, this is the right way to do it, and she's done a cracking job. So again, this one's very close to being up there at the top, just because again, having that kind of beautiful, almost perfect double exposure going on, for the way I like them, at least, because there's obviously different ways of doing it, but this for me just hits the spot. It really does.
Really cool. So our last special mention is by John Broughton, and this picture is called Disgruntled.
This one I absolutely adore, for the main reason is when I look at this, I think of I harken back to the days of the Magnum street photographers and documentarian photographers. So I look at this and I get like almost Elliot Erwitt kind of vibes. And I've got a big book of Magnum over there. I absolutely adore their work. And Elliot Erwitt has always been one of my favorites, especially in regards to street and documentarian photography. And this looks as if it could have been shot by someone like himself. It's that disgruntled look. It's wonderful, and then you see the I'm guessing the mother probably on the other on the side, kind of giving a similar disgruntled look, and it makes you wonder what's making them pull this face. You wonder what's outside of the frame making them react this way. So yeah, and if it weren't for that Under Armour little logo on the jumper, this could have been at any time. I recognise the little logo that I realise it's a bit more modern, I guess. But no, it's stunning, absolutely wonderful. And again, it brings me back to the photographers of the 60s doing wonderful, wonderful documentary work.
It's got such a nice, like, crisp detail to it. I don't know why it first made me think of like Billy Elliot or something. Just like
I get what you mean,
like a cheeky little kid. But yeah, I love the little highlight in the eye as well. It's just really beautiful, crisp exposure. So that was Delta 100, and John's advice for that is that it develops nicely in Tmax Developer for anyone who does home developing. And he says, my son's expression of joy as we embark on a day out in the Easter holidays, which is very cute.
He looks so happy to be there, bless him.
Yeah, he looks so happy.
I completely get the T-Max idea because again, you're going to try and get that fine grain from it, and then Delta 100. Obviously, you want to kind of, if you're going for a lower ISO, you want to really make sure it's a super fine grain. And honestly, you could tell me this was shot on something even lower. There is such fine detail in that, and the grain is basically non-existent. So honestly, absolutely wonderful job, especially for home developing as well.
Yeah.
Like, absolutely smashed it.
So well done to all our special mentions. We are now moving on to the lucky dip winner. So Willow hasn't seen this one much.
Get it up again now.
What do you think, or what film you think it's been shot on?
What film do I think that's been shot on? Oh,
It's quite saturated colours, isn't it?
yeah. I mean, I've actually got a tattoo of a clown because I adore like the clowns and the fun fair and stuff like that. I think it's brilliant. So looking at this, like just seeing that kind of very creepy-esque clown face in the background.
Yeah, very creepy.
But film stock wise, I don't know. It's obviously something 35 mil, and I must admit I'm very out of touch with 35 mil these days. I'd maybe go, I don't know, Pro Image 100. I Lord knows. Actually no. I want to say I feel like it's going to be one of those double film stocks because I've never used them. Double bubblegum.
Close. It is double film stereo. So on the right lines.
Close.
So about this film, Heather says it's very good towards the center of the roll, especially if you like muted tones. But the ends can be quite harsh in the wrong settings. But it's great. It's a great film to experiment with. I don't think I've ever shot that one before, actually.
I've never shot any double. I've looked it up and been intrigued by it, but again, where I'm naturally, I sit in the 120 to large.
Mm-hmm.
I've never really experimented with it. I've always wanted to have a little try of the bubblegum, I must admit, because I like the kind of pastel tones you're able to achieve with it. But I do wonder. Oh, sorry, go on.
There are like a lot less sort of experimental films once you get into the medium format. Like Lomography do a few, like Metropolis or Purple, but that's all I can really think of, I guess.
Yeah, there's not many out there really. I suppose it might be development costs and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I do wonder with the harsher tones whether overexposing by a stop or two might help eliminate that and just push it into a little bit more of a pastel tone.
Yeah.
Might be worth trying. Who knows? But no, there's a lot going on. But but there's still I can still read it, I guess.
Yeah, that clown is just the complete focal point for me. It's just very creepy.
That's kind of why I like
it. Heather says she loves the creepy element of this image. It looks like something out of a horror film, especially with the weird face staring through the ride. It's one of those images that isn't that creepy on the surface, but once you start to look closer at it, it makes you feel unsettled. I would agree with that because there's no one on the ride either. So,
I mean, this is why I probably really appreciate it. Again, I'm all about the dark fun fair stuff. I love that kind of vibe. But yeah, that creepy face in the background just sells it for me. I love that. I do wish, because I'm a little bit of a fiend for bokeh. I do wish that there was a bit more maybe image separation. And being more focused on that face, I guess. But other than that, I love the whole creepy vibe that comes with it.
Well done to Heather. You are a lucky dip winner, and now we are finally moving on to our grand winner, who is John Broughton again.
Oh, was he a previous winner?
So he was one of your special mentions. He took the image of the kid on the tube, I think.
Oh, I see. No, I absolutely adore this shot. I'm not usually one for like a Dutch angle, you know, that kind of lean vibe. But for me, for one, seeing red scale film, I love that. Not many people use red scale, and I think it is a wonderful thing, especially with like Lomochrome Purple becoming quite popular and stuff like that. But I love this for it has a very like almost post-apocalyptic dystopian vibe to it.
Yeah.
And I love like a lot of like dystopian science fiction, and I can see this being in some sort of like dystopian film, or being like in the future when we've settled on Mars kind of deal. But the other thing is just this all the leading lines and the straight parallel lines. There's something just really appealing and very pleasurable about that. And also just I quite like architecture. I'm not great at shooting it myself, I must admit, but there's something about brutalist-esque architecture where it's all those kind of harsh, grey, straight lines and stuff like that. And it just tones really well. And having that kind of center point meet at the center of the other building, like the dark edge, it's really satisfying to look at, I must admit. I would happily have this hung up on my wall, for sure. I would have a print of this. So if you are watching this, please get in contact with me. I will buy a print from you. I will get this happily on my wall.
He's got a really nice range of the reds as well, from like the really deep reds to, I guess that's where the sun's shining on the building and it's gone sort of more yellowy tones.
Yeah.
It's a really cool image. Have you ever shot large format red scale? I guess you could just flip the negative and shoot at red scale if you wanted.
Oh my God, you could. So I've made my own red scale film in the past. I took some Fuji and I did the whole swapping it, turning it over and stuff like that in the past. But I'd never thought about it. Yeah, large format, it's going to be so easy.
Yeah, literally just flip it over. That would be cool.
Okay, you put some ideas in my head. I'm going to have to work on that. But no, this again, I love people experimenting with this stuff. And I know red scale kind of went out of popularity a little while ago. And seeing people kind of like trying to bring it back, I think it's wonderful. It does have its place. There are certain times where I look at red scale shots and I'm like, you shouldn't have shot this in red scale. It just doesn't work. But for me, this works. This really does work well. And I think it's because it's one of those images where if I saw this, I would want it to be black and white. And I think it's those images that work better in black and white of architecture that kind of work well as a red scale shot.
Yeah.
So, there's always been a red scale shot that sticks in my mind. It's just one of a barn in the middle of somewhere, I don't know, but it's one of those shots where you look at it and you're like, this needs to be black and white or red scale. And he's just, again, ticking all the boxes, all those kind of like perfect concentric lines coming together. Just that perfect black triangle meeting in the center of the other building, going all the way up. As I said, I would have a print of this on my wall happily. I think it's an outstanding image and I think he's done a cracking job with it.
A really cool one. So John doesn't say much about this image, although he has titled it Apocalypse, which is a bit like what you said.
Yeah.
But it was shot on lomography red scale, and his only sort of tip for this was the Negative Lab Pro, which I think is a software a lot of people use when they're scanning in their film. Says didn't work very well with this film, so watch out if you're using Negative Lab Pro. Do you scan your own film?
Not currently. I am working on getting a scanner soon. People may see from my Instagram posts here and there that I complain about having a 300 DPI scanner because it's just...
Oh, I saw that. Yeah.
But I am working on it. Again, the money that's being made through the wet plate stuff is going back into, again, producing more content for myself, and getting a scanner is one of those things. So lights and scanner, they're up next.
People can underestimate like the importance of a scan because you can take an amazing image, but if the scan isn't any good, then like there's no point. It can make or break it completely.
Yeah, it's like I've used certain film labs in the past, and I quite like a low contrast, kind of low saturation-esque image. I just have I think it's because I love a pastel tone, and just naturally kind of you don't want too much contrast with pastel. And I've had so many times where I've had rolls come back from scans that these labs have done, and they're so contrasty that they've removed essentially all the shadow detail from the image, and it's just unworkable. So yeah. Very much I think if you're gonna do it, even if you don't develop it yourself, I think it's worthwhile scanning your own, because at least then you've got a bit more control.
Yeah, I agree. Well, thank you so much for judging, and well done to all the winners and special mentions this month. It's a really nice variety that you chose. We often find people come on who either love colour or love black and white, and like you've got a bit of a mixture in there. Yeah, some really entries this month?
Yeah, no, I mean, for me, where I've kind of gone down the realms of doing street photography, I do a lot of portraiture and then I do a lot of color work with my film, but then with the wet plate, it's obviously black and white regardless. I do have a love for kind of like a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
Seeing again some experimental stuff with like the red scale film as well. It's just nice to see it, as much as it's not stuff I necessarily do too much myself. It is wonderful to see, and again, just a beautiful image. So I will say it again, please do get in contact. Let me buy a print from you, please, because I want it. Again, and the other thing is I wanted to be able to have that kind of chance to talk about different varieties of image as well. But it just so happened to be that these ones are all outstanding and they're all very different. So it was a great chance to give a little bit of a critique, I guess. But absolutely wonderful work from everyone. Kind of disappointed I didn't take some of them myself, if I'm honest.
Thank you so much for coming on, especially so last minute. You really saved me today, but it's a pleasure talking to you, and I'm sure you're going to have a lot more followers and questions about the wet plate process now. You'll definitely have some people intrigued. Don't forget that Willow's giveaway is still open, so don't miss out on that.
Until 1st of June at 6 o'clock.
Okay, awesome. Is it multiple entries?
No, I'm just doing single entries because I've got a busy life, but it's hard to be possible. But yeah, it's just that kind of standard like and comment kind of vibe. If you want to share it, it doesn't get you an extra one, but if it helps me out, so it'd be lovely.
Yeah. So much to learn. Hopefully we'll have you down soon at Analog Wonderland, or we'll see you at another event soon or something. But
I'll definitely be trying to show my face everywhere I can. But thank you again for having me. I know it was all last minute, but it's my pleasure to be here and have the chance to get involved, you know.
Yeah, it's been lovely to talk to you. We will speak to you soon.
Speak to you real soon.
Bye.
Bye.